So what's going on?
I'm trying to caffeinate myself. I don't know where my coffee went. I got some sort of McDonald's beverage. I need cardio. I need cardio, and I'm coming up tomorrow on week 2 of this ankle injury. It's really frustrating. So
Oh no.
yeah, I got to get back on the bike or something.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm dragging a bit. Sorry, low energy today.
No worries, no worries. I'll try to fire you up. I'll try to get you going. I'll try to find what buttons to push. I've been following yours and Madsen's lead on the whole cold shower thing.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I've been doing it for like 2.5 weeks now, and it's interesting. The afternoon, like after about a week and a half of it, my afternoon feels so much different. I still have like a cup of coffee in the afternoon because I enjoy it, but like the afternoon brain fog has gone
Yeah.
away, believe it or not.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, I just I did a cold one this morning. I'm gonna have to get out my thermopan. I don't know if it's the right thing to measure, but I've got like a accurate culinary digital thermometer, because I've noticed, I don't know if there's something wrong with my shower or if I've acclimated, but it's just not cold anymore. Like, it's cold, but it's not that like shock you can't breathe cold anymore. I'm like,
Oh
what's
yeah,
happening here? Like,
it's the weirdest thing. Like I know because our shower actually has a thermometer on it.
oh,
It's got a
does
little
it?
clock and a thermometer on it, and
Look at you, fancy.
well, we're living with family right now, and that was the shower that they had installed when they remodeled the bathroom. I'll tell you this, in many ways, and this is a complete other thing with like sustainability and whatnot. It is a bit overkill because it's just one more thing to fix and whatnot. But that's a whole other thing aside. But the thermostat on the shower reads like 75, and yeah, after a while, like I'm like, can it go a little bit lower because it's starting to feel warm,
Mm-hmm.
and it does something to you, and it just kind of it kicks off some kind, and I have to go back and read exactly it because it's been years. So like years ago, I read about it. And I did it for a while and got out of the habit. And then Jason mentioned he was installing like a cold pool. Like he got like one of these
Oh,
portable things to
really?
have a cold plunge at his house.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
you mentioned doing the cold shower thing, and then it was like, that's right. I do remember like there's health benefits to it. And yeah, one of the things for me is like better mental clarity throughout the
Yeah,
day.
yeah. Well, that is awesome. But yeah, I've been feeling the same thing. Like when I first started, it was so cold I couldn't breathe. It was like I couldn't take a full breath. It was so cold. But now I get in there, it feels warm. I'm
Yeah,
like, this is weird. It
it's
feels
weird.
warm.
Yeah, you acclimate that much to it.
Yeah, it's crazy. But also as much as it's like overkill and things to maintain, I am all in on like all the shower gadgets and the hotel room I had when we were in Vegas at the Marketing Analytics Summit. Was it the Marketing Analytics Summit?
Yeah.
Dude, that shower had like 12 shower heads on it. I didn't even know. It had so much stuff I didn't even know how to use it. But then it also had the steam setting so you could pump steam into the shower.
Hmm.
Um, and it was just amazing. And I'm like, I need all of this. It's just so awesome.
My brother-in-law has the whole steam thing,
Mm.
so they have that in the bathroom downstairs at their house. So yeah, when I was up in Connecticut last weekend, sure made sure to take advantage of the steam shower.
Yeah, the steam can be nice. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Well.
All right, and at this point, I don't know how we're going to
Yeah,
pivot
and
into
people
our
are turning
topic.
in, and it's like,
Well,
Jim and
let's
Jason
just
are talking about showering. I don't even know what's
yeah.
happening here today.
I'll tell you this: like, if you're looking for a bit of a change, like change up your routine, there's just something about taking a cold shower over a hot shower. Like, there's just I don't know. I feel again, I don't have the brain fog in the afternoon.
Yeah,
It
no,
feels
it's not.
good.
It's addicting.
Yeah, it is. Let's just jump right in cold
Let's do it.
into our topic. So I want to continue the theme we've had for the past couple episodes around managing analytics teams and managing analytics programs. And this week in particular, I want to talk about a trend I've been seeing a lot recently, and one I have some issues with. It's the idea of using the agile development methodology and applying that to an analytics team, but not just applying it to what you would think of right away with those involved with the instrumentation of data collection, but just the overall analytics program in general. So this is, analysts that are providing insights, looking to manage things in sprints and manage them in points, all of the major aspects of Agile. And I am by no means a Scrum Master, so don't crucify me if I don't name everything specifically correct. But just the overall concept of that idea of sprints and points are assigned to things, and trying to clear out cards at the end of a sprint, and measuring success ultimately too. What happens is you measure the success of the team on how many points are completed in a sprint, how many cards were closed out, how many cards were rolled over to the next sprint. All of these various things go into the measurement of a team. What does all of this mean? What have you seen as far as this movement to apply agile to analytics?
Well, I hate it, but I think I've been educated that when done right, it's incredibly valuable and useful. So that's the short answer.
Interesting.
And I think like most things, we tend to blame the framework for good or bad based on our experiences, rather than looking at the experiences themselves as far as how much they're influencing the framework. Meaning, you could have the greatest framework in the world, but you don't put the right people in place, you don't set the right expectations, you don't run it properly, and it's a complete failure. Is it fair to blame the framework or not? And I think that that's been a lot of my experiences with it. And I actually floated this out on Twitter. It's been several months, saying, "Man, I hate this," and I was shocked at how many people are like, "You don't know what you're talking about. Let me give you some education," and it was great. They really opened my eyes to the value that a properly run agile methodology can be had from an analytics program perspective. With that said, the one common thread that ran through that advice was, if you're going to try to take Agile as it was designed for development teams and copy and paste it on top of analytics teams, it's gonna be an utter failure, because those two teams operate in completely different ways. And so it's one thing to use the framework. It's a whole other thing to use the framework and make sure that you adjust it to your specific team and their needs. So again, if you're treating an analytics team as if they're an engineering team, it's going to fail. But if you take the core concepts of Agile and you apply it to the team to be able to manage workload and properly prioritize and set expectations with the business and kind of codify all that, it can be successful. And there were several people that shared case studies, both that they were personally involved in or others, in which Agile has been applied to analytics programs in a very successful and healthy way.
So do you have a couple examples or specific examples where it was just that copy and paste, and maybe some of the aspects that caused it to fail, as well as vice versa, where they made adjustments?
Well, I think with most frameworks, most organizations take a copy-paste approach. And I think that's because the allure of using a framework like Agile or any other framework is that it takes a lot of that cognitive load off of us to think through how we properly structure and manage our teams. And so we just apply it to the team and say, do this thing now. And so I think, that probably describes the majority of cases of how Agile is being used, not just in analytics, how it's being used across the board, and across all teams that leverage it. The challenges that I have seen with it, specifically from an analytics perspective, there's a lot, but really two things that stand out. One, I think it works really, really well when you have a clear set, of requirements and tasks. So anything more on the side of the spectrum that is architecture, implementation, data collection, integration, data warehouse, like anything that's kind of in that mindset, I think is a better component for using Agile, because it kind of mimics to a degree a software engineering project. And so from an implementation standpoint, I think you have a lot better of alignment, as long as you're open to being creative, to massaging how you use Agile to be more in line with an analytics project than a software engineering project. I think it can work well. If not, it's very, very challenging. However, it's the other side of the house that's really, really hard, and that's more of the insights and analysis. Analysis in and of itself is an art of discovery. It's going out and just questioning things and looking at things and testing and poking and prodding at things. And to put a arbitrary timeline, a week, 2 weeks, whatever it is, to do an analysis, you're artificially limiting the depth and value that an analysis can produce. Because analysis and analysis doesn't fit nicely into a sprint bucket. It just doesn't. That type of work is not aligned with that. Now, somewhere in the middle, it may be a bit more fuzzy and gray. Can we align reporting and dashboards? Sure, maybe that's a better use case for Agile. But as we move further away from kind of the rule-based things, so set up this report, build and execute this dashboard, deploy this implementation. The further away we move from that to things of uncertainty, which analysis is, it's a practice in uncertainty, the harder it is to try to shove it into this Agile methodology. So that's number one. Trying to treat analysis as a sprint, I think, is a losing game. And I just don't see a lot of upside to it. Reporting, dashboards, implementation, sure, we can fit that into the framework. But something like analysis, kind of more strategic initiatives that just require unbound thinking, I think we're cutting our value short by trying to fit it into an Agile process.
Yeah, and that was one of my concerns as I've started to see this trend develop, is that there's a risk with analysis where you're going to strip the curiosity out of the analyst. Because you're right, it's hard to structure sometimes. Sometimes you just gotta work with it. You gotta play with it, to be honest. So putting like a time bound thing on it, find an answer in this 2 week sprint is hard, because a lot of the organizations I've seen try to apply it, they apply like the copy and paste framework of, I'm going to do this analysis in this 2 week sprint. But when maybe you learn more or whatnot, it starts to stretch longer than that. And then depending upon who you have running it, like if it is a Scrum Master that has like a very development heavy background, then everything starts getting measured on, well, so and so is always behind on completing cards. They always go more than one sprint, or however you want to word it, and it starts to become very narrow and draconian.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. The second point, as far as a challenge, and just as a tangent, you probably can't hear it, but speaking of acclimation, I grew up next to an Air Force base near the flight line, and I have become so acclimated to the sound of jets flying over my house, it didn't even faze me anymore. But since I moved away from there, and I don't hear F-16s all the time, whenever I hear them, I'm like, oh, what's going on? What's going on? Anyway, I have never had more jets over my house than when I lived by the Air Force Base than today. Anyway, as President Biden is in town, and I'm guessing it's part of the security detail of all these like F-16s flying overhead.
Gotcha. Okay.
It's wild. So the second thing is that, and this isn't specific to Agile. It's a challenge. Anytime you put some sort of metric in place to measure the success of the team, is it can always be gamed, and there's always a risk of it, right? And so if we're using like the point system or whatever to talk about how great our analytics team is because we did X or Y, my immediate answer is so what? Like, okay, like, what value did we end up, what did we actually walk away with? Like, I don't care how many things I don't, again, I'm not a Scrum Master either, so I don't know the terminology, so I don't know if it's a points thing or whatever, like we add up to say how great we are, but it's just too easily gamed, right? And I think we've talked about this on numerous episodes. The biggest real world example of this is a McDonald's or a Wendy's, that has the timer, the drive-through timer in the building, and there's some sort of metric they're being measured against that you can't have a car in the drive-through longer than X minutes. And so if you're gonna go over that, what do they tell you?
Pull up a little bit further.
Yeah,
here.
just pull up here or go park over there. We'll bring it out to you. Boom, reset the timer.
Yep.
Right. And so it's like, from the number standpoint, it's like, oh, look, they're doing great. But from an output experience standpoint, it's like, we're not telling the full story here. So that's what my concern is when it comes to using Agile or any other framework to measure the success of the analytics team. If we're using those numbers to say, hey, look how great we're doing, it puts us at risk of either intentionally or unintentionally gaming those numbers, and we lose track of the actual value we're supposed to be creating and the experience that we're creating for our counterparts in the business. I will tell you some of the positives that I've seen from it. And again, it's I don't know, unfortunate is not the right word. I'm just not an expert on Agile, so I don't have the right terminology to speak about it in kind of the right terminology. But one of the things that inflicts so many analytics teams is being overwhelmed and overburdened with requests. I think we've seen it in a good percentage of the companies we've worked with. We hear it from friends. We hear about it at industry conferences. Our teams are burned out because everyone in the organization is excited about data and insights, or their bosses are asking them for numbers so that they can put them in their report. And so the analytics team is just getting buried because these people are throwing it over the proverbial cubicle wall. Hey, I need this number. Hey, pull this for me. Hey, do this, do that. And there's no structure to it. And as an analyst, as someone building reports, you get burned out of that really, really quickly. And if you're not, and you manage it by just trying to turn it around quickly, we now start to put quality at risk, because it's like, I just don't want any more stuff thrown on my pile. I'm just going to quickly get this out, even though it might not be right. And so that is one place where I've heard from people where Agile has been incredibly valuable, is just adding some intake and structure. There's a agreed upon cycle of when requests come in and how they get groomed and how they get prioritized for sprints and when they get worked on. And so from an analyst perspective, having that level of just structure to what is being assigned to me and having some kind of a point system to articulate in numerical format a workload that I can take on, that's a huge thing for analysts that often feel overwhelmed and burned out.
Yeah, you do bring up a good point there because and I will fully admit, like, I guess maybe just because I've seen so many organizations go down this path, and instead of building it out in such a way that it really aligns with what the analytics team is trying to do and the value it can provide, it's just like, well, our development team does this, this team uses it, these other teams use it, so we're just going to use it all in the same way. And it turns the analytics team into glorified ticket takers. But you're right, if done right and a proper intake queue can be built out, you can reduce the burden on the analysts. I do see that, because maybe outside of Agile, that is one thing I try to work with clients on, is that what does intake look like? Because the majority of them, it's just emails. So they become they become accustomed to just, last in, first out, or whoever's screaming the loudest, and not like a proper priority set on it, or, evaluating what the value of the organization is.
Yeah, and without straying too far off the main topic, I think a lot of that intake or lack of intake or feeling overwhelmed with requests being thrown over the wall, a lot of that honestly is self-imposed on the analytics teams, because they have failed to be proactive in nature, meaning if analytics teams would have put in the time to think about base reporting, to think about what's critical or for the business units that they support to align the direction of what they're doing from a dashboarding perspective, and then being curious to proactively look at the data and provide insights and analysis. Because we haven't done that, then we've put ourselves in a position to be order takers, right? Like the business craves that data, or they need that data, or they're being told they need the data. We haven't been proactive in providing it to them, and so they have no other choice than to kind of bombard us with requests. So as much as I empathize with our fellow analysts that it's incredibly overwhelming to have these things thrown on, especially without an intake process, I think it's important to note that a lot of it is self-imposed. And so I say that by saying if we can solve that if we can solve the intake and prioritization process with Agile, that is awesome. But let's not let us solving that through Agile pave over the fact that there was still an issue there, that this was created by us by us not being proactive and providing the business proactively what they needed.
Mm-hmm. We often talk about analytics not, having a seat at the grown up table. We've used that analogy multiple times. Um, do you see this, trying to move to this framework, or teams adopting this framework, exacerbating that problem?
Um, Maybe. So I would say, again, it comes down to how we're leveraging this framework. If we're allowing the framework of Agile to dictate the way that we engage with our counterparts in the business, I think it's going to further degrade and devalue our role within the organization. It's going to even push us down to the littler kids table,
Mm-hmm.
because
And that's my fear, by the way. Like
absolutely,
like,
absolutely.
I've said it earlier. I'll say it even clearer now. Like, I definitely have a jaded view of this, and that's part of the reasons why it's good to talk it out. Because every time I've seen it applied, it turns the analytics team into nothing but glorified ticket takers.
Yeah, and they become a glorified help desk, and
Exactly.
it really reduces how they're seen within the organization. So the maybe part of the question that you asked is, yeah, if we're using Agile to fundamentally structure who we are as a team, and it structures how we engage with our counterparts in the business, and all of that, then I think it puts us at real risk to be pushed even lower down in the basement, if that is at all possible. However, if we use Agile as part of our toolkit, and it helps us be more efficient, and we're not using it as a communication layer with the business, but we're using it as a way to structure how we work, and then we put a layer of communication and more human element on top of it in how we engage with our business colleagues, then I think we have a very real opportunity to rise in the organization, because we're being smarter about what we do. We're prioritizing our time. Hopefully we're using that prioritized time to develop richer, more meaningful insights. We don't need to expose how we make the sausage. And I think it's unfortunate that that is the downfall of so many organizations. And again, we're kind of talking about Agile today, but this is in no way limited to Agile. If we're exposing externally our processes and how we work, we're really devaluing the output of what we do. Those things should be internal to how we work, help us to work smarter, more efficient, and the proof and the interaction comes out in the value and how we engage with our partners within the business. And if we do that right, I think, again, a huge opportunity for us to rise up in the organization. If we do it wrong and we kind of put the tools first and let processes dictate how we work, we're gonna be stuck in the basement.
Mm-hmm. I do want to dig into other benefits because, like, it's very clear. Just starting out this conversation, this is not a Boolean situation. It's not just good or just bad. It's not on or it's not off. It's there is absolutely an in between that you've talked about. So I do want to talk about the benefits that you've seen with it. What are some other risks we that could come as part of this? We just talked about, like, being turned into a glorified ticket takers or glorified help desk, stripping the curiosity out of the analysts, and they just get turned into just returning something out. Like, was it you and I talking about this the other day? Someone that we know who, like, they get screamed at so much that it's just they just turn stuff out, because they're being pushed for whatever reason to just turn stuff out, whether it's right or wrong. What are some of the other risks that could potentially be seen?
Well, I think we hit on the big ones again, like destroying natural curiosity, basically turning analytics organizations into assembly lines of output. Look how much we did, look how much we implemented, look how much data we collected, look how many reports we created. It's a very, very easy trap to fall into. And additionally, I think it takes out some of the complexity and nuance that analytics has. We try, again, in order to try to fit what was designed to be a framework for doing software development, and now we're trying to mash analytics into it. We kind of have to bang off some of the edges because it doesn't fit, right? It's like that toy you had when you were a kid where you fit the shapes into the thing, and it's like, well, this doesn't fit, but if I like knock off some of these edges, it will fit in here. And that's kind of what we're doing in order to smash analytics into this framework that was developed for software projects. And analytics is not a software project. And so I think some of those edges that get knocked off is the nuance and complexity that analytics is not just about data. It's not just about statistics and mathematical formulas. It's about understanding people. It's about understanding psychology and why people do what they do. It's about understanding the political pressures and nuances within a business and how that impacts the data that we share and offer. And I think a lot of that gets destroyed in this process, and what ends up coming out of it again is it's really, really good at churning out stuff, but stuff that potentially is even less aligned than before with things that are actually meaningful to the business. I mean, once we've gone past the critical dashboards and reports that business teams need to align themselves with where they are in any given moment, it's those nuances that we can provide that really help provide a stronger understanding of our customers, a stronger understanding of our products, that often get shaved off when we try to smash analytics into a software development framework.
Yeah, and one thing I want to add to what you've been talking about, like, what you've been talking about has been focused, like, on the work, the quality of the work, or the insights that come with the work that's done. I've also noticed an impact to the team itself, because analysts are not like developers. You have two completely different mindsets, and when trying to provide impose a development framework on top of an analyst, it really beats them down. Like, it kind of removes any kind of excitement for the work. It removes the fun that comes with it. Like, because I've seen analysts who kind of prided themselves on, like, more or less being treasure hunters, trying to find that nugget of information that can provide a ton of value to the organization, and time boxing them and holding them to arbitrary metrics of, like, completing number of things in a sprint or getting something done within a certain time period. It is demoralizing in many ways.
Yeah, and this comes back to how we started the podcast with you saying I'm not a Scrum Master. What you're talking about is really the output of the quality of the Scrum Master you have for your program. And I think so many organizations look at it as a technical role. It's like, well, I'm Six Sigma 500 black belt level 7 Scrum Master. Okay. I don't care. Like, do you understand what we're trying to do as a team? And I've seen two polar opposites of this. Scrum Masters that are professional Scrum Masters that have experience running Scrums for engineering teams, 99 times out of 100 complete dumpster fire applying those to analytics programs. They have no idea what they're talking about. They're saying, well, just do this. This is how software engineers do it. I'm not a software engineer. I'm an analyst. You can't treat me like a software engineer. You have to understand the nuance of my job, but they can't. They're stuck in this rigid system of, but this is how I've always done it with software engineers, and it's an absolute failure. However, on the flip side, I've seen Scrum Masters that have either had background in analytics or have been open to the fact that they don't know, that have been incredible. I don't know if I can shout them out or not, but we worked with a company a couple years ago that was absolutely the case. They had what I would call an Agile light deployment in their analytics team. They hired a guy who had experience as a Scrum Master to, run the Agile process. And one of the first things he said when I talked with him, he's like, I don't know anything about digital analytics. Help me, teach me, give me as much knowledge as you can. Like, when I go off the rails, correct me. Like, I want to learn as much as I can. After 6 months, he was indispensable. That team was running like a machine. And I told him, I said, dude, if I could replicate you across every company that was running, it doesn't matter if they're running Agile, if I could replicate you as a project manager for analytics in every company, they would instantly be better. So it really comes down to the people, oftentimes more than the actual framework or process. And again, if you're trying to force this to be a software project with a Scrum Master that thinks everyone's developers, it's a nightmare. And you know what? Your best analysts are going to quit because they don't want to be treated like that. If you have a Scrum Master that has experience with analytics, or at least open-minded that they don't know what they don't know, it can be incredibly, incredibly useful. With most things, it comes down to people.
Yeah, and I appreciate your insight this episode, because I'm just going to beat it to death this episode. I definitely came in with a particular perspective. This is bad. Like, this could be really, really bad for your team if you're considering it. But yeah, like, you've kind of made me rethink my perspective on it, that okay, maybe just my experience has been with organizations that, to use your words, just copy and pasted what their development teams were doing and imposed it upon their analytics team. So as far as like the benefits go, one of the big benefits we talked about already was helping put together a really strong intake queue that helps keep the team from becoming overwhelmed and burdened with requests. What do you think some of the other benefits can be to applying a methodology like this to an analytics team?
A lot of people in digital analytics are incredibly introverted and shy away from difficult conversations. And so what that means is they become not your prototypical yes man, but they become, I don't even want to say people pleasers. It's just they don't want to have to push back and say, no, I can't do that. No, I'm not going to do that. No, I don't have time to do that. So many in digital analytics it's uncomfortable for them to do that. But if
they just do it.
They just do it, and then they get burned out and overwhelmed, and they bitch about it in private, but they just do it because they don't want to have that kind of confrontation or conversation, or say, I'm not going to do it, or push back. They really struggle with doing that. So if you can abstract them from it personally and put a framework in place, and it allows them to put points and t-shirt sizing or however we do it to project sizes, then it's not me. It's just, it's Agile is saying I don't have time to do it. And they're so much more comfortable interacting with the system, and they don't have to then go tell requester, I can't do it, I'm not going to do it, this is too difficult, it's too much time. They just scope it out within the system, and then the system reports back and says, okay, well, Jim can't work on it, or because he's got too many other things. So, what are we going to do? Do you want to delay it? Do you want to drop things he's currently working on? And you don't have to have that conversation as the digital analytics person.
That's a really interesting perspective. Like, yeah, you've kind of you've how do I want to say it? Like you've kind of opened my mind to this because again, like I always kind of bristle at this, but you're right. Like even though it may seem impersonal, having that queue and the way the queue is managed can actually remove a burden from the team and not make it cold in a way.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think it's an important thing to recognize, and I don't know why it's so specific to this industry, but again, the industry is overwhelmingly introverted, you know, anti, tough conversations. We just don't want to do it. And so, if we can find methodologies to be able to address that without just kind of taking the burden on and kind of sacrificing ourselves because we'd rather work until 2 in the morning rather than to have a challenging conversation with someone in the business, then it solves some very real problems that lots of analytics organizations struggle with because they don't want to have those perceived confrontations.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, it's been this is, and I mean this genuinely for anybody listening. I came in with a different expectation for this episode. I had my own views, but kind of talking through a few of these points, it's kind of given me a new perspective. It's made me rethink a few things instead of kind of just doing the blanket pushback.
And really, that's a great way of defining what our role in analytics should be in general, right? Like, we should be about causing people to question their beliefs and stepping outside their comfort zone and questioning, our own biases and experiences and saying, none of us have all the answers, and we have some strong beliefs, and there may be some truths to it, there may be some non-truths to it, but the most important thing is that if we're going to grow as individuals and if we're going to grow as organizations, we have to be open to, logically having these conversations just to question things and having the, what's the right word here? The strength. I don't know if strength's the right word, but being comfortable of saying okay or changing your mind. It's like okay, we kind of blast politicians for flip flopping. But I think we should be rewarding politicians, right? Because we don't want someone that took a stance in 1982 to necessarily have that same stance in 2023. So much has changed. They've learned. We've grown. Like times have changed. We should be rewarding people that are open to changing their stance and saying, I thought this before. Now I think this. And I think that's incredibly healthy. And that's really what we should be doing as analysts is putting our insights out there, really causing people to question things. And in order to do that, we have to question it ourselves because we're just as vulnerable as anyone else to having biases and kind of locked into our way of thinking. And we have to be just as open to saying, well, I think really strongly about this, but I'm always open to evaluating and thinking about other viewpoints. And it's not Boolean. It's not so like either this or that. It's, somewhere in the middle. It's like, okay, I disagree with some of that, but I agree with some of this. And we take all these ingredients and put something magical together, and it's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, totally agree with that. And yeah, I appreciate you kind of giving me a new way to look at that this episode. Cool. So this has been good. It's you've actually changed my mind on something.
I'll take it.
Yeah, because I mean and you kind of got me right at the beginning where you're like, well, what have you observed? What have you observed those that just try to take Agile as it's done everywhere, or have they tailored it to their team's needs? And I think it's like shit. Yeah, it's kind of hard to argue against if you haven't really, if you've only observed it one way.
Yeah. And that's a huge lesson, not just with this topic, but any of them, right?
Yeah.
Like, This is how I observed it. And I talked about this on LinkedIn yesterday, by the way. There's a great quote. I'm just going to pull it up because I don't want to screw it up. There's a great passage in Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance that talks about this, that it just sticks with me, and I think about it all the time when I find myself kind of thinking one way and not being open to anything else. So the sentence is, we take a handful of sand from the endless landscape of awareness around us and call that handful of sand the world. You know, so we're at the beach, we pick up a handful of sand and say, this defines everything. So think about going to the shore, right? Like picking up a handful of sand is like, this describes everything within my local. No, it literally, like, I can look just down the way and see something completely different that you can't describe by that handful of sand. And so we have to be really, really careful of taking that handful of sand of our experiences and saying, this represents the entire world.
And I think that's a great place to end it on.
Awesome.
Cool. Well, thank you much. Let's go ahead and wrap up there and talk to everyone later.
See you.
See ya.